Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahmavidvaram. All over India or Bharat, there are a plethora of saints and devotees, whether in the present day or in the past. There are countless figures whose lives and whose words and teachings we can learn so much from. And there is so much that we can absorb from hearing about their love for the higher. There is a treasure that is available to us in the form of the lives of these saints and devotees. And one such figure was born as Nirmala Sundari Devi in the late 19th century in a village in what is now Bangladesh. She was born into a family who were devotees of Vishnu. They were Vaishnavas. And from a very young age, she was observed to have a very pleasant demeanor. She was always ready to help and to serve, and she was always ready to take direction. So whenever she was asked to do something or told to do something in a particular way, she was always ready to listen. And her family, observing this as she grew up, some of them started to wonder whether this meant she was not sort of using all her mental faculties fully, that maybe it means, something's wrong because she doesn't seem to be thinking for herself, and rather she's just sort of taking direction and following whatever everybody else says. This is something that we do in all areas of our lives, that in fact everybody does in so many different ways. Often when we don't understand something, instead of trying to think about why that thing is that particular way or that person is that particular way, we make assumptions. And it's such a simple thing because there is no one in this world, or there are very, very few people in this world who have not made some assumption about something at some point or another. And so everybody assumed that perhaps it means she's sort of a very simple person. And she's very sort of suggestible. And so they became worried for her, but at the same time, they saw that, she wasn't really having any problems in life. She was sort of facing everything very cheerfully. And as was the custom at the time, she was married at the very sort of young and tender age of 13. But as was also the custom, these girls who were married weren't often going to live with their husbands until they were adults, as we would now sort of term them in modern society. Once you reach the age of 18, you're automatically an adult. So she was married at 13, but her husband living in another town, at that time, she went to live with her brother-in-law and sister-in-law, her brother-in-law and his wife. And being the youngest and being the sort of younger brother's wife, she took on this role of, again, a role of service. And she began to serve everyone. She began to look after the children and look after everything in the home. And what everyone started to understand is that although she seems very sort of suggestible, she seems to sort of not have any preference of her own, it's not because she is simple-minded. It's because she is incredibly pure in mind. On the first day of these talks, there was a story that was told about two painters and about how one painter produced this beautiful piece of work. And the second, all he did was simply shine the opposite wall. This is a story that was told by Nirmala Sundari Devi, not when she was a child and known by this name, but when she was older and known by a different name. And we see this in her life, that it seems that she was born with this incredibly pure mind and beautiful disposition, which meant that she was constantly seeking to serve everyone around her. So she lived with her brother-in-law and family for some time. And when she was 18 years old, it was decided that she would go to live with her husband. And when her husband met her at the age of when she was 18, he also began to understand that this girl is not an ordinary person. She has this incredibly pure nature. And in fact, their relationship also was not a typical relationship between husband and wife. It remained very pure. One day, she was outside just doing something, and suddenly this thought came to her mind. How would it be to take on the role of a sadhaka, of a seeker? And as she later came to describe them, these thoughts were, she called them khayals. And that is to say, they were not prompted by any sort of ego, whether thought or action. They were simply to be acted out almost by her. And so she had this thought, how would it be to be a seeker? And later that day, when she came home and all her work for the day was done, she said to her husband, do you mind if I would do a little bit of sadhana? And so he said, of course, yes. And all that she did was she sat down and she closed her eyes and she started taking the name of the Lord. Hari, Hari, Hari. And as she did so, almost like a key was unlocking a door, suddenly so many things started to open up. Perhaps impressions from past lives that were just waiting to express. And the results of sadhana, the results of, for example, japa, that somebody would see after years and years and years, started to display within days. And she started to go into almost like trances, which we understand were her mind becoming absorbed and her going into samadhi. And although she never had any formal training from any guru, various techniques of sadhana in all sorts of different paths started becoming revealed to her. she started practicing yoga and asanas which she had never learned. Suddenly her husband observed her performing all sort of complicated asanas, etc. So all these fruits of sadhana started to manifest within her. And she would go into spontaneous samadhi. Her mind would just become absorbed. And as she started to master all these different practices, in fact, what happened is her husband then, at a later time, took diksha from her. He was initiated by her, and he began to look upon her as his guru. And so when it's said that their relationship was not an ordinary one between man and wife, it is very clear that with him taking her as a guru, it really cannot have been an ordinary relationship. So she took on this sadhana role, and she started to explore all these different paths. And of course, as with any saint, the more this brilliance starts to sort of manifest, even in just the way that they look and the way that they appear to others, more and more people are attracted towards them. And this is what she found, that many people started to come hearing about her. After a few years of marriage, her husband, who was known as, later in life became known as Bholenath, he liked to travel. So they began to go on yatra. And they traveled to so many different places. And they were accompanied by various devotees, very few at that time, one of whom was known as Bhaiji in that circle. And one day in the course of their travels, they were in a particular place, and he came into the room where she was sitting. And to him, it seemed as though she was just radiating bliss. And from that day forward, he said, we should call her Anandamayima. And that is how she came to be known. Nirmala Sundari Devi was then known as Anandamayima. So she used to travel from place to place. And with her husband, as long as he was alive, and then later various devotees would be around her. One very interesting thing which is said by those who used to accompany her is that how they would describe it is that if Ma was not, if she didn't have any help, she would not do anything for this body. So they found themselves having to feed her to make sure that she would eat, because she had no regard for sustaining this body through food. In fact, she said at one point, this body does not need to be sustained by food. I only take a little so that I don't appear odd to all of you and I can remain with you and you don't think there's anything wrong with me. Such was her relationship with her body that she did not feel the need to sustain it in this way at all. So this is one thing that they observed. She also, in the course of her life, went through various illnesses. And in fact, at one stage, she met the Shankaracharya of one beat. And he said to her that you must take care of your body in a very loving way that saints often do. They like to advise everyone, and they're so loving that it naturally expresses in that way. And Ma was such that she saw everybody as either mother or father. And she said to him that, oh, Father, this body is not me, this is not mine. And these illnesses will come and go. That was her attitude. Once, another very well-known figure, Paramahansa Yogananda, went to meet Ma. He had never met her before. And he heard that she was in a particular place, so he went to meet her. And as he arrived there, he saw that she was sitting in a car, in this open-top car, and that car was surrounded by so many devotees. And they were just leaving. So he got close to that place, and Ma saw him and immediately went and embraced him almost. She put her arm around him and she said, Father, at last you have come. Paramahamsa Yogananda had not ever met her or ever seen her before. But she addressed him as Father, and she said, you've come after so long. And how he narrates this incident, he says that all these devotees are looking at her, and perhaps they understand, but most likely that they don't know what they're seeing. He was close to her, so he says, looking at her, I could see that she was absorbed in this state of bliss. She was in samadhi. And she was remaining with them and interacting with them. And yet all the time, this awareness of the higher, whether we call it God or the self, that was never lost in her mind. She, at one point, she met various saints and sages. In particular, she met Swami Shivananji. She also met Swami Chidananji. And she met Puja Gurudev, Swami Chinmayananda ji, more than once. Once she came in the mid-70s to Sandipani Sadhanalaya Ashram in Bombay. And there are beautiful pictures of Ma sitting with Gurudev in the Jagadishwara Mandir. But she met him much earlier when Gurudev was a student under Swami Shivananji at Ananda Kutir. And at that time, before Gurudev had gone to Swami Tapobanji, he was living in Rishikesh, and he had taken up a practice of pranayama. But he was facing a problem. And that problem was, when he was practicing this pranayama, no matter what he ate, he would always be hungry. This incident, Puja Gurudev actually relates. And so Swami Shivananji then advised Gurudev that go and see Anandamaima. She must have been in Rishikesh at that time. So he went to see her and asked her advice. And he described this challenge that he was facing to her. And she told him, or she told someone, go and bring 4 rotis. And so they were brought. And she told Gurudev, take one bite, eat a little bit of all 4. So he took some bites. And then she said, now take those 4 rotis and put them on your head. She took them and he put them on his head. Then she said, take your hand and place them on top of the rotis. So he did so. And after that, he went away, having met her, etc. And he observed that problem that he was facing completely vanished. And later Gurudev said, in what scripture is it written that you take 4 jhuta, means the food that you have eaten from, 4 jhuta rotis, and you place them on your hand, and with that jhuta hand, I mean the hand that you've eaten with, you place it on your head, and this is the result that comes. In what scripture is that said? Meaning, this is the power and this is the glory of saints, that through the sadhana that they have done and through all the wisdom that they manifest, that they have, such things even are possible. So with Anandamayi Ma, even though she had no formal training in any path, she was able to advise people and to guide people in such a way that their problems were solved. There is now an ashram in near Haridwar where Ma's Samadhi is. And whilst she was still in her body, she started this practice of having 1 week of what is called a Sanyama Sapta, like a residential, what we would call a retreat or a camp. 1 week, Sanyam Sapta. Sapta means 7 days, means a week. And Sanyam means discipline, control. And what happens in that Sanyam Sapta is there is a very strict daily schedule. And she would encourage various people to take a vrata, to fast. And so there would be various things happening throughout the day, chanting. There would be satsang by various Mahatmas on all sorts of different topics. There would be meditation. And finally, in the night time, there would be satsang with Ma. And she would ask, people would ask questions and Ma would advise. And this is again somewhere where it was seen that no matter what anybody was asking, she was able to give an answer in such relatable terms, in such a beautiful way, despite never having had any formal education, any sort of formal spiritual education also. So again, in the life of Anandamayi Ma, we see that her life itself is a demonstration of this relationship of devotion with God, but also the understanding of oneness with Bhagavan. And this was something that she also used to say, that not in these exact words, but that our relationship with Bhagavan is most important. That we, living on this earth, living in this world with all our duties, etc., all our responsibilities, we must perform whatever duties have come to us. But the most important thing is that are we offering everything to God? Because in order to reach that understanding, where we can have this conviction that I'm not this body and I have never been this body, what we need is for our mind to be in such a state that that conviction can take place. And what will allow us to mold our mind in such a way is when there is love for Bhagavan. Ma was, as described by so many saints, constantly in this state of bliss, remembering God. And as with any of these saints, Mahatmas, to understand them or to try and have a feeling of how they were or who they were. Very often, if you listen to devotees' experiences with those saints, then you get a glimpse into how it must have been to be in the presence of such a person. And consistently what is said is that Ma radiated this serenity and love to whomever it was that she met, to whoever came to her. Always this was consistent. Whether we are seeking peace for ourselves or we're seeking to bring peace to the people around us, we have to understand how it's possible. Because to bring peace to others isn't possible unless we ourselves have found that peace. If our minds are agitated, it's more likely we'll bring agitation to the people around us. So to find that peace ourselves, to be ready to serve others in this world, bhakti is our means. Because Bhagavan is of the nature of bliss and peace. Knowing Bhagavan, relating ourselves to Bhagavan, how will we not find it? A devotee certainly will. May Anandamayi Ma's life and teachings also inspire us to find that bhakti within our own minds. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.